Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of sources, articles, research, our own notes, and really try to pull out the most important bits of insight.
Uh-huh.
And today we're diving into something that, well, it literally touches every single one of us, from the deepest parts of the ocean right into our own bodies.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering.
Think about this. Plastic production. It's on track to triple by 2050. And these tiny things, microplastics, they've already found them in human placentas, in our blood, even in breast milk.
And the links to health problems are becoming clearer, aren't they? Things like higher risks of miscarriage, stillbirth, even childhood cancers. It's deeply concerning.
Exactly. And that's why those recent UN negotiations in Geneva, INC 5.2, they called it why they felt so incredibly important.
Right. The whole world was watching, really hoping they could finally hammer out a global, legally binding treaty on plastics. This was supposed to be the moment.
Supposed to be, but it ended up hitting a wall, a deadlock, just stalled.
Yeah, a real shock for a lot of people involved.
So today, that's what we're doing. We're going to unpack what actually went down in Geneva. Who are the key players, really? And what does this failure, this deadlock, actually mean for us, for the planet? That's our mission.
And we've got a good stack to draw from Dialogue Earth, the Center for International Environmental Law, the New York Times, Guardian, Mongabay, University of Portsmouth, Al Jazeera, Climate Home News. Quite a range.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Where did this whole treaty idea even start? What was the original goal?
Well, the initial mandate was, frankly, huge, really ambitious. Back in 2022, the UN Environment Assembly, UNEA, got 175 countries to agree on the need for a legally binding treaty.
Legally binding, that's key.
Crucial. And not just on plastic waste, but tackling pollution across its full life cycle.
Full life cycle, so cradle to grave, essentially, from the moment it's made.
Exactly. Production, how it's used, how it's disposed of, international cooperation. The whole 9 yards. It wasn't just about cleanup. It was about prevention, about the source.
That is ambitious.
Yeah.
So heading into Geneva, INC 5.2. That must have fueled a lot of optimism, right? Especially since it was meant to be the final round.
Oh, absolutely. Hopes were really high. See, the previous big meeting, INC 5.1 in Busan, it kind of ended with the draft text, just full of brackets, the bits everyone disagreed on.
Right, unresolved issues.
Loads of them. So Geneva was supposed to smooth all that out, get rid of the brackets, and deliver a finished, solid treaty.
Okay. But then, what happened? The chair, Luis Valles, he put forward some draft text, didn't he, to try and find that middle ground?
He did. He presented 2 drafts.
Yeah.
And, well, the reaction was pretty explosive. Widespread shock, really.
How bad?
Diplomats were using language you just don't normally hear, calling the drafts unacceptable, repulsive, even an empty shell. Over 100 countries, the UK, the EU, Panama, just flat out rejected them.
Wow, repulsive. That's intense for diplomacy. I remember that quote from Panama's diplomat, Juan Carlos Motre.
This is not ambition, it is surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really captured the feeling from many delegations.
So what was so wrong with these drafts? Why the outrage?
Well, from the perspective of those 100-plus countries, it basically gutted the ambition. The drafts were missing teeth.
Like what specifically?
Key things. No legally binding limits on plastic production itself. Weak measures, if any, on regulating the harmful chemicals in plastics. No real restrictions on the most problematic types of plastic products.
And the money. How is it all going to be funded?
That was another huge hole. No clear obligations for financing the treaty's implementation. One analysis basically called it a waste management framework without any clear funding. It just didn't hit the root causes many felt were essential.
Okay, so that really throws the main conflict into sharp relief, doesn't it? You have this high ambition coalition on one side.
Exactly. A big majority, actually. Over 100 countries. We're talking the EU, the UK, Canada, most of the global south, and especially the Pacific small island developing states, who were really on the front lines of ocean plastic.
And what were they pushing for? What was their bottom line?
Legally binding cuts to plastic production. That was central. And strong regulations on the chemicals and the most harmful products. They wanted something with real impact.
I saw something interesting about Fiji's negotiator, Savendra Michael, representing islands that contribute so little plastic but suffer so much.
Right. And he actually showed some flexibility. He indicated they might be willing to compromise a bit on the specifics of production limits if other areas, like controlling those toxic chemicals, were made much stronger.
So a willingness to negotiate, but wanting a strong outcome overall.
Precisely. It showed they were serious about getting a deal, but not just any deal. It had to be meaningful.
Okay, so that's the high ambition side. Who was pushing back? Who formed the opposition?
Well, it was a smaller group, but a powerful one, mainly oil and gas producing nations. Think Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, Kuwait.
Ah, the petrostates. Makes sense, given plastics' origins in fossil fuel.
Exactly. And they were digging in their heels. Their position was basically that the treaty should only focus on waste management and recycling. Forget production cuts.
What was their reasoning? Or their stated reasoning, anyway?
They argued that stricter measures, especially on production, unfairly targeted crucial industries. The delegate from the UAE, for example, Sulaiman Shaheen Mohammed Abdallah, said they wanted a treaty that unites rather than divides, and crucially, does not tie their hands or limit their capacities.
Doesn't tie their hands. Sounds like protecting industry interests.
That's certainly how many interpreted it. And then you have the U.S. position, which shifted.
Right. Tell me about that. The U.S. wasn't always aligned with that group, were they?
No. Previously, there was more support for a broader treaty, but under the Trump administration, there was a very noticeable shift. The U.S. started aligning much more closely with that petrostate minority,
How so? What were they doing in the talks?
actively opposing production caps. And they even proposed striking any mention of the full life cycle of plastics from the treaty text altogether.
Wow, trying to remove that core concept.
Yeah. And coming from the world's second biggest plastics producer, that alignment really threw a wrench into the works. It definitely contributed to the deadlock. It raises big questions about how global efforts can proceed when major players pivot like that.
It really does. It feels like it's not just about countries disagreeing anymore. There's this other layer, these unseen forces. You mentioned the Center for International Environmental Law, CL. They flagged something about lobbyists, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge part of the story, maybe the crucial part behind the scenes. CL identified at least 234 fossil fuel and chemical industry lobbyists registered for the Geneva talks.
234. Just lobbyists for that industry.
Yes, and get this. That number outnumbered the combined diplomatic teams of all 27 EU nations, plus the EU delegation itself.
Wait, more lobbyists than the entire EU delegation. That's staggering.
It really is. It gives you a sense of the scale of the industry presence trying to influence the outcome.
And were they just observing,
Yeah.
mingling,
Yeah.
or actively involved?
Oh, very active. SEAL documented them using what they call the deny, distract, derail playbook tactics we've seen in climate talks too. They were openly pushing their agenda in the main sessions.
How openly?
Well, some were even part of official national delegations.
Embedded within country teams. Which countries?
SEAL identified lobbyists within the delegations of Egypt, Kazakhstan, China, Iran, Chile, and the Dominican Republic, among others.
So industry representatives literally sitting at the table with national negotiators.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
And SEAL's conclusion was pretty blunt. The industry's goal is a treaty that protects their bottom line, not the public or the planet.
Okay, so you have this intense lobbying pressure, this deep divide between countries, and then you throw in the UN's decision-making rules, that consensus thing, right?
Exactly. The consensus-based decision-making. It sounds good, everyone agrees, but in practice,
It means one country can just say no and block everything.
pretty much, unanimity is required. So even a single nation, potentially influenced by those lobbyists we just talked about, can effectively veto progress for everyone else.
That seems fundamentally broken for tackling a global crisis.
Bjorn Bieler from IPN put it very starkly. He said the collapse of the talks proved that there's no way we can proceed with consensus. He called the result the chaos you saw.
It really makes you question how effective this kind of multilateralism can be if it's so easily gridlocked.
It's a massive challenge. And it brings us right back to the real-world impact, the human and environmental cost of not having a strong treaty.
Because the plastic problem isn't waiting for diplomats to agree.
Not at all. Remember that projection. Production tripling by 2050. We could be looking at, what, 736 million tons a year by 2040? It's almost unimaginable. And recycling. Currently, less than 10% globally gets recycled.
Less than 10%. And most plastic comes from fossil fuels, right? So this isn't just a waste problem, it's a climate problem too.
A huge climate problem.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly personal, getting back to those health impacts.
Yeah, those microplastics again. Found in placentas, blood, breast milk, linked to miscarriage, birth defects, cancer, fertility issues. It's not abstract. It's literally inside our bodies, potentially harming us and future generations.
And the burden isn't shared equally, is it? The production side of things hits certain communities much harder.
You mean like those living near the petrochemical plants?
Exactly. Indigenous peoples, frontline communities, often communities of color. John Beard from Port Arthur, Texas. Right in a petrochemical hub, he talked about his community's health being sacrificed to make excessive quantities of plastic.
Sacrifice, that's a powerful word.
And Shiv Srivastava from Fence Line Watch pointed out that kids near Houston's petrochemical complex have a 56% greater chance of getting leukemia. 56%.
That's horrifying. And it's not just production, right? What about the people dealing with the waste, like waste pickers?
Their situation is often incredibly precarious, too. John Chweya, a waste picker from Kenya, highlighted the hazardous conditions they face, the exposure to toxins, and the need for a just transition, making sure efforts to reduce plastic don't destroy their livelihoods without offering alternatives.
So when you hear all the health risks, the environmental justice issues, the sheer scale of the problem, you can understand why some people were saying a weak treaty would be pointless.
Worse than pointless, even. Salisa Tripit-Sirawat from the Environmental Justice Foundation argued that an empty shell treaty, one based on voluntary promises, would actually be worse than no deal.
How so? Worse than nothing.
Because it would create a false sense of progress. It would legitimize inaction, let polluters off the hook, and take the pressure off for real binding change. It would basically serve industry interests while pretending to solve the problem.
Okay, so Geneva stalled. It sounds pretty bleak. Where do things actually stand now? Is it completely dead?
No, not completely dead. It's important to stress that. The talks are adjourned, not officially ended. There's expected to be another session, INC 5.3, though we don't have a date or a place for that yet.
So the process isn't totally abandoned.
Right. Inger Anderson, the head of UNEP, was very clear. This work will not stop because plastic pollution will not stop. People want a deal. The pressure is still there.
But if they just go back and use the same consensus rule, won't they just hit the same wall? What are the options to actually break the deadlock?
Well, the most obvious one is to change the rules. Adopt a voting mechanism.
Like a 2/3 majority vote instead of everyone needing to agree.
Exactly. Over 120 countries actually supported that idea in Geneva, calling it a safety valve to stop a small minority from blocking progress. Melissa Skye from SEAL basically said, look, if you want a meaningful treaty, you either need to use voting or you need to take these talks somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Like outside the UN framework entirely.
That's another path being discussed. A coalition of the willing. A group of ambitious countries could just decide to forge their own treaty outside the main UN process.
Has that kind of thing worked before?
It has. The Mine Ban Treaty is a key example. It started with a smaller group and grew to include over 160 countries, having a massive impact on reducing landmine use. So it's possible.
Interesting. Are there other routes? Maybe using existing agreements?
Yeah, that's another idea. Could they build a new protocol under something like the Basel Convention that already deals with hazardous waste, including plastic waste reduction, reuse, recycling? So maybe leverage that existing structure.
So adapt what's already there.
Could be an option. And of course, even without a global deal, countries and blocs like the EU can just keep pushing ahead with their own strong rules.
Like plastic bag bans, extended producer responsibility, stuff we're already seeing.
Right. Lead by example, build momentum from the ground up. And, history does give us some perspective. The Montreal Protocol, the really successful treaty that phased out ozone-depleting chemicals.
Yeah.
It took 8 years just to agree on a key amendment for hydrofluorocarbons. 8 years of tough negotiations. So these things can eventually succeed, but it often takes a lot of persistence.
Okay, so summing up this deep dive, Geneva was this clash, really, a clash between the urgent need to tackle a massive global crisis and, well, powerful economic interests and procedural roadblocks.
Absolutely. A complex dance, as you said, with incredibly high stakes for our health, for the planet, and showing a clear need for maybe a different way of doing things.
Which leaves us with a thought for you, the listener. If these powerful forces driving plastic production can keep stalling global action using lobbying and procedural rules, what does that really mean for us?
Yeah, what does it imply about individual responsibility versus systemic change? About community health versus corporate profit? And maybe even about whether our current systems of global governance are up to the task of handling these huge planetary crises?
How can you, listening now, make sure your voice, your choices, contribute towards a future where, people and planet aren't consistently losing out to profit? Something to think about.
Definitely. We encourage you to keep reflecting on plastic's role in your own life, that full life cycle, and stay tuned, stay informed. This global deep dive is far from over.